So obviously, the election's a big topic. It feels like the country wants a change, and we're going to get a good election. But when you look at the polls, it's definitely not saying that, and it's giving the Conservatives, almost a 0% chance of winning. Very, very low. A lot of the polls that get shared where Conservatives are winning, that's on the popular vote, and I think people don't realize that, the Conservatives won the last popular vote, and the Liberals still won. And right now, I think every major poll has the Conservatives winning a majority government, and the Conservatives probably winning the popular vote. So that's not a great place to be. And it's interesting to look at some of the stuff, why people vote. And I think Liberals, it's overwhelmingly fear or anti-Trump sentiment, and they're conservative voters, mostly younger people, want to change. So I really hope the polls are wrong. We're seeing really good numbers of people coming out and voting already. And usually that means people want to change, but it also could just mean that the parties are better at getting people out. I think like what I've seen in Alberta already is it looks like the sentiment, and I would share this as well. If the popular vote goes Conservatives and the Liberals win a majority government after the last 10 years and how bad it was, I think the separation sentiment in Alberta will be as high as it's ever been. And the business people I talk to, like a lot of them are just considering moving. Because if after 10 years of, horrible, horrible government and our economy has been worse than anywhere else and all these things that have went bad, if Canadians don't want to change now or can't get it because the way our election's set up, they don't want to stay in a place where they don't have a voice or can't be heard. And for sure, when the majority of people don't vote Liberal, if that's the case, I'm not saying it is, and they still get into power, it just, whether or not that's the accurate way to do the election, but it makes it from the outside, like it does look like it's rigged, or the vast majority of people are going to be unhappy with the election. So if that's the case, I think there'd be a push for separatism from some of the Western provinces, and I think I'd be for it. But some of the stuff's came out. Carney released his platform just yesterday, I believe, and it's interesting to see because everyone thought is voting for him because they thought he's the guy that can get us out of this, what he calls the worst. I think he calls it like the worst economic tragedy of our lifetime, which I don't I don't understand where he's getting that. The tariffs haven't had a huge impact, and it doesn't look like they're going to stay long term, but they're really selling fear on the left, and people are buying it. So he comes out with his platform, and everyone thought, he was in the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada. What they don't realize, when he was in the Bank of England, he pushed all the green agendas from as much as he could. Power bills doubled there under his term, or they maybe even tripled, but it went up a huge, huge amount. And, now he's coming in with his platform. Not only is it, probably drawn up by the exact same people that did Trudeau's, but there's way, way more spending, $130 billion of new spending. We're not that big of an economy here in Canada. That's a huge amount. Trudeau, not that anyone ever believed him, because he said the budget would balance itself. That was kind of the thought. That clearly didn't happen, but at least he had that thought, right? He at least had an idea of when he would balance the budget. And he also took over a balanced budget and then ran us into a huge deficit. So I wish people would understand, if the same exact party, they just change out the face, the same people draw up the platform, if they're the people that told you they took over a balanced budget and that it was then going to balance itself, and then they ran us into, more debt than we've ever had as a country, are now coming out with a platform that does not balance the budget, has huge, huge amounts of more spending than the previous government. So Carney always talks about how different he is than Trudeau, and he told Pierre during the debate, you're not running against Trudeau. And then he runs basically a very similar platform. And here was, like I mentioned before, at least Trudeau tried to say we're going to balance the budget. And if you look at this, his first year he started running a deficit. His next year he had promised a $10 billion and it was $20 billion, so that's double. The following year, similar, it was double. The next year, it was triple what he thought it would be. And by 2020, he said we would have a balanced budget, and we were at $40 billion deficit. That was pre-COVID, so they can't blame it on that. And so that's if Carney now is coming out, not even saying he's going to balance it, but he has $160 billion of more spending. What does that look like if that number's double? It's the same party. It's mostly the same cabinet people. So if they're coming out and saying, hey, we're not going to balance the budget. We're going to run this huge deficit. Can we really trust that it will even stay there, right? Or is it going to be double, just like the previous administration, who it's basically the same one with a new front guy? The people that are voting for Carney because they think he's going to be this, the economic savior, you have to think, and again, how much of a role he had in the administration, I really don't know, but he was the economic advisor, and you can just look at Canada's, look at our track record for the last 10 years. It's horrible. We're almost dead last for GDP growth. If you look at a chart, it's just depressing compared to other countries. And also try to, 0.6%, just think of where inflation was and all the other things. And then we grew by 0.6%, right? But I don't think anybody could look at our GDP record and defend that over the last 10 years. And it's not like, hey, we were in a global recession. I think we're almost dead last in all of most of the developed countries. So they all did much better, right? They were at 5% or 8% or 2%. Like, that's a huge increase. 1.2% is double what we did, right? And that's not impressive. So I think, yeah, you can't. Obviously, the Liberals don't want to talk about the last decade because it was so bad. So we're trying to just sell fear in the current moment or what's going to happen in the future. And the Conservatives are trying to say, hey, look at the past 10 years. Do we want another 10 years of this? And hopefully Canadians don't. And I think it's kind of this funny switch where when Trudeau first got in, it was young people that voted for him and they wanted the change in Canada. And, and then at that time it was marijuana was getting legal and all the things. They were sick of the old white guy being the prime minister. And now it's been such a shift, right? Like, the meme of the election is a 60-year-old guy, the Liberal guy, flipping off the camera, right? And it's kind of, we've just had this switch where now all of a sudden the Liberals are the party of boomers and they have this old white billionaire who's running or business person who was always like despised by the left. And now we have a young, fresh candidate who wants change, and that's on the right. And I think politics always do switch that way. You look at who used to support free speech, and it was always the left, and now that's changed, right? For some people, that's a single issue on this election. It's online censorship that the left has pushed, and they're going to continue to push, and the people on the right don't want it. So it's funny to watch how things change now. The young generation is the ones who are conservative. Even in the States, that started to switch where younger people were coming out. It was like cool to be Republican again, right? And spending money, the people who vote for government spending, that the government doesn't make money. They can only tax, right? They don't make money. They take money and then redistribute it. So, just saying, hey, we're going to spend all this money and give you all this free stuff, it's costing you a lot of money to do that, right? It's no different than, like, people always talk about our free healthcare system, and yeah, it's great to have it, but what that costs us per person is a huge dollar amount, right? It's not free. Nothing is free. It's being taxed and redistributed. So, yeah, I don't think the Liberals have a plan to get us out of this. We'll see what the Conservatives looks like. I'm sure they don't have a perfect plan either to just go to all of a sudden get a balanced budget, but they do have a plan to stimulate a lot more of the private sector. And I feel like the Liberals' plan is to just pump up the public sector and build homes. The government needs to build homes, and all the things that they're pushing are going to be government jobs, which is just taking money from people, redistributing it very inefficiently. So obviously the election's coming up. The polls are open right now. Get out and vote. If you want change, I think it's a pretty easy decision. We have a track record. We know what the Liberals are like. We know what it's going to be if we have another 10 years of this. At least if you give the Conservatives a shot, I think that is the option for change. They have a lot of really good ideas for real estate investing. Their platform's definitely way better than the Liberal platform. So get out and vote. Get your family to vote, your friends. I mean, the polls don't look great, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. Trump's first term, I think he had a 1 or 2% chance of winning the night before the election, and he ended up winning. So there's hope there. Lots of people are getting out and voting and are pretty enthusiastic for the Conservatives. So I'm still hopeful that they can get it, but it's going to require every one of you to get out and vote and make your voice heard. So thanks for listening this week. Hopefully by next week we have we're going to have a new prime minister. Hopefully it's the one we want, and we'll see you guys next week.